I had dedicated 13 years of my life to my wife's father's business, including my time. I had put in the effort, the ideas, and the devotion to work through the weekends and missed holidays. I gave up sleep in order to turn the faltering company into an empire valued at $85 million. It wasn't just a business to me. I created it from the ground up, transforming unsuccessful ventures into calculated victories, completing transactions that others thought were unachievable, and elevating my father-in-law's name to a position of prestige and authority. However, I was seated at the elegant dining table that night with relatives who were unaware of the storm under my composed exterior. I heard the words that made a huge difference: "Your wife's new husband will now take over." My wife's speech was smooth and professional, as if she had practiced saying it with her father, sitting at the table as though this were simply another business decision or a change in power. The head of the table simply grinned in agreement, something I should accept without question. So I tightened my hold in the silverware while maintaining a neutral expression. I resisted giving them the satisfaction of witnessing mirage and the treachery of an individual who had devoted his life to a cause only to be dismissed like a worker whose employment contract had ended. I looked around the table, unaware that the rest of the family was eating and conversing, oblivious to the importance of what was being spoken, or perhaps they were aware but decided to remain mute out of a refusal to contest the patriarch's ruling. Since that was the way things had always been and I had been a fool, I would be foolish to imagine that years of sacrifice and hard work would make me irreplaceable. If I thought loyalty mattered, I was foolish to think that my wife would, with whom I had formed a life, viewed me as a partner rather than a stand-in. I gave her a closer look and saw something I should have noticed long ago. She had never defended me, never questioned her father's authority even. When his decisions were unjust, she had merely acted as the submissive princess and daughter, waiting for her father to set up the best potential arrangement for her. But she was now promised to another guy, not because I had set my fork aside, but because I was no longer helpful to them, not because I was lacking. I brushed my napkin lightly over my lap while keeping up the facade of composure that had seen me through innumerable business meetings. I wouldn't respond since they anticipated me to be angry. They anticipated that I would object like a guy who was blind to the game they were playing. But I saw it now, teeming with discussion glasses clinking and laughter. But everything had stopped talking to me, because I had created an empire for them, and they believed they could give it to another man. As I left in silence that evening, instead of sleeping, I sat in my study, gazing at the papers arranged neatly on my desk in the faint light: contracts, agreements, and financial documents, all evidence of what I had provided to this family. They had undervalued me because they believed I was merely the workhorse, the idiot who had constructed their fortune throughout their reign, but they neglected to remember the significance of the horse they had ridden. I had mastered running without a rider after 13 years. And if they believed I would just abandon everything I had created by 3 a.m, they were seriously mistaken. I was by myself in my home office when the light of my laptop screen shedding light on my resolve kept me awake. Sleep had no place in my head, and as I went through every contract and document that night, my heart was pounding. The betrayal from earlier that night still echoed in my ears like a financial statement I had ever signed. "Your wife's new spouse will take over," echoed, and those words should have devastated me. They should have broken my resolve, but they had instead sparked something much stronger, a relentless desire to reclaim what was rightfully mine. For 13 years I had been meticulous. I had been making moves while my wife lived in luxury, and my father-in-law had been our respectable businessman, quiet and subtle, but unquestionably strategic. I wasn't a fool. I knew how power changed within my household, showing me that loyalty was never assured, and that the only person I could ever really rely on was me. Thus I had made sure that my authority over the business was not merely symbolic. It was awful, unquestionable, and completely in my fingers. As I retrieved the executive's shareholders agreement, the numbers glared back at me from the keyboard, a reminder of the things I had planned over the years. 60.2% of the business. I owned the business, not my wife, father-in-law, or the foreigner they had handpicked as my replacement. They believed they had cornered me, but they were unaware that I had previously constructed an escape route. They had anticipated me to vanish in silence, but as the clock struck 8:45, I was going to remind them of just who they were dealing with by the time I entered the corporate office. not as a man who had been cast aside, but as a man prepared to burn their meticulously planned plans to. The ground the foyer was already packed with people while commuting between meetings. Executives and staff presented me with others giving me respectful nods, while others looked at me doubtfully. Did he hear the news? Whispers had already begun. I ignored them. I wasn't here to listen to gossip. Would he resign? What will he do? I took the elevator to the top floor and strode into my office, my presence alone sending a wave. I was here for battle. Danielle, my assistant, looked up from her desk, her expression showing no signs of the mayhem that must have been going on in the firm's grapevine. She had been faithful, astute, and always one step ahead of me for almost 10 years. I put my briefcase down and said, "Schedule a board meeting for noon." She hesitated just for a moment before nodding yes. I responded, my voice calm. Her eyes fluttered as she realized that the battle had already started. I was already waiting for their next move as he sat down in my chair. My father-in-law wasted no time in planning to advocate. For his chosen replacement, he would persuade the executives to approve the change and present it as an essential change in leadership he would bolster his claim with my wife's identity. After all, who would doubt a father entrusting his company to his daughter and her new spouse? But the issue was that I wasn't only a name on paper at precisely M. I was listed as the name on the contracts that were important. I was in my office when, without knocking, the door flew open. My father-in-law came in, first his presence, as dominant as ever, followed by my wife, composed as though this was just another meeting. Then he entered, the alleged new husband. He was tall, young, and self-assured, just like my father-in-law would think deserving of replacing me. He radiated a kind of pride and smugness. He nearly laughed when I thought he had already won. My father-in-law spoke with a voice full of expectation during the transfer. I steepled my fingers together in an intriguing transition as I relaxed back in my chair. The man next to my wife grinned as though he thought this was funny. I chose to ignore him because he was only a pawn in someone else's game. I was more concerned with the actual danger that was looming. "We need you to supervise the handover." My father-in-law, at his words, firm. I slowly exhaled and shook my head. "You don't have the authority to make that decision," I replied unnervingly. Serene, a glimmer of annoyance flickered across my wife's face. Hardly changed, but her new husband's arrogant smile wavered. He grabbed the remote control on my desk and pushed a button behind me. The enormous wall-mounted screen came to life, showing the executive shareholders' agreement. Their eyes darted to the document, which they initially stated was confusing before panic set in. It declares that the majority shareholder must approve any transfer of control. I remarked, observing their reactions. They realized the truth of the situation, and I broke the silence for the first time. My father-in-law's calm exterior cracked. He mumbled, "This is impossible." I clarified, breaking the tension with my voice, "What's not possible?" As I looked at me wife, disappointed. "Did you truly not see this coming?" She didn't respond. I allowed the quiet to linger between us before turning to face the man who had entered. Believing he was about to inherit an empire standing next to her, "You have two options." I informed him, "You can either work for me or you can leave and never step into this company." Again, his face became crimson. His jaw tensed. He glanced at my wife before turning to face my father-in-law. My father-in-law paused for a moment before storming out without saying a word, expecting a victory lap. My wife waited for a little while longer. Her hands clenched, her mask of indifference slipping. She wasn't used to losing, and neither was her father. They'd lost today, but I knew this was just the beginning. She eventually stated, "You knew all along." Her voice faltered. I tilted my head, thinking about her words. "Show, did I know you?" I asked, soft but sharp. "Don't be foolish. You were aware of my father's plans." She stopped herself, and I let out a deep breath, drumming my fingers on the desk. "Of course I knew," I murmured smoothly. "Your father is extremely predictable. He believes he can move power around like a deck of cards." She pinched her lips into a narrow line, "Underestimating me just like you did. It need not be a war, you know." I chuckled, but it sounded dry, unhumorous. Her eyes darted to the enormous screen behind me. But she hadn't moved yet. The document, showing the shareholder agreement, destroyed all their meticulously planned strategies. She asked, "Do you think you can?" I cautiously got to my feet, stepping in front of her, and slowly walked around the desk. Your father no longer runs this corporation. I remarked quietly. I do. If you wish to continue playing this game, you'll do it according to my terms, she sneered. You don't control me, I do. I replied, smiling. What counts, and if you believed that I would simply leave you? Juan, that is the company's future right now. Her new husband tightened his jaw. You don't know me as well as you believe, she muttered, trying to hide her feelings, but I knew her too well. She was terrified that this wasn't over, her voice more desperate than confident. Saito, I know this is only the beginning. She pivoted and left, slamming the door behind her. I rolled my shoulders back and exhaled. The first fight was won, but I had already started preparing for the next steps to secure my place at the helm, and this was the beginning of the end.